So as your site is starting to take shape and starting to look the way you want it to, you're getting to the point where you're going to want to start to recreate this inside your HTML, because you don't want it to just live in Adobe XD. You want this to actually be a website that you have. So there are going to be two things that we're going to do that's going to help us bring all these pieces together. One is going to be exporting the pieces out of Adobe XD, and the other is going to be sharing in developer mode so we can get some code. The first thing I'm going to go over is exporting, because it's a little bit more involved than perhaps you might imagine, but it will also save us some time in the end. So I'm going to start by looking at this home page here. So I'm going to grab my Zoom guy and kind of go into this. So when I did my mock-up, as you remember, I used my lovely kale salad here as my background, and then I added that blur, and I added, so when I go into my home, I've got my main navigation here, and I had this nav text, I got my bear icon, I've got my blur, and I've got my picture. Now, I don't really want to try to figure out the sizing on that, go into Photoshop, add the blur, make sure that I crop it the exact way that I have it. The nice thing is I'm going to be able to export this out of Adobe XD exactly like the way it is. And for the images, again, remember in here, I've cropped them a certain way. I don't want to have to go back through and redo all of my work in Photoshop. So the time-saving thing, the nice thing, is that I'm going to be able to tell Adobe XD to export out the elements that I use inside my mockup with the exact cropping that I use, and it's going to give it to me in the way that it looks inside Adobe XD. Now, the downside is that when you export out elements, you're only able to export out one kind of element in a batch at a time. So if I say selected everything and I wanted to export it, it's going to either make everything a JPEG, make it a PNG, make it an SVG, whatever it is, it's only going to do that one type of file, PDF. You guys have done it with the PDF where you've gone and saved it as a single page PDF. Now, if you have this lovely SVG image, you don't want it being saved as a JPEG, because then you're going to have a background. Well, similarly, I don't want to save this full color image as a PNG because it's going to take up more space. So you are going to have to think through what format you want each thing exported as, and kind of go through it in chunks and export out everything that is that kind of thing together. The other thing is that when you have something that is multi-layered, you want to make sure you group it and you export that group. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through selecting the elements of this page I would like to export and batch exporting them. So that's why it's done in batches. So you'll batch all your JPEGs, you'll mark them all for export, then you can go through and say batch all your PNGs. So let's think about what on here we want to export as a JPEG. I want this background image behind my nav. I want these three images, and I want the about the creator. I'm going to have this guy be a PNG, and then the rest is all text with styling. And I'll talk about how we get that styling in the next video. So with this nav, let me open this up. So I've got my nav text, my bear icon. I've got this blur and picture. Now, this guy here is the thing I'm going to be using. It says mark for export. And the items that I mark for export are then going to be file, export, and we're going to do batch. Anything that's marked for export will get exported with the batch. But I don't want to export out a blur layer and a picture layer. I want one cropped image. So I'm going to group those guys. And I'm going to call this my blurred carrots. And that's what I want exported. So I'm going to click mark for export. And what it will do is it will export out a picture that is these blurred out carrots. Handy. So now I'm going to go in, and it's this image that I would like exported. The same thing here. I want that image, this image, my tip card. Why do I have two images? I'm not sure. That's clearly the one I want. I'm going to get rid of that other image. Oh, I think when I added in, I was trying to update my tips a little too quickly. Where's my last tip card? Oh, it's at the top. Well, my main navigation should be above that tip card. Otherwise, it's going to do funny things. And then the about the creator, not the text, the image is also what I want. So let me click on this image, rectangle 4. That's what I want exported. So that's another handy thing. If you click on it, then it's highlighted in here. I'm going to close that. Now I'm going to go ahead and set File, Export, Batch, and then I'll show you exactly what I mean. So here it says Format JPEG. You have these 4 formats. They're all you can export. So that's why with the text, I'm going to be copying and pasting, and then I'm going to want to grab the styling from the developer mode. So I want to do these guys as JPEGs. I want 100% quality. That means they're going to come out at the size that they are here. And I want to export them at 1x. If we were getting into more about responsive image sizing, and again, things where you have screens with higher pixel definition, we would talk about that. But that's beyond the ken of our intro class. I'm going to go ahead and export it in this images folder, and I'm going to just go ahead and leave it all at that top level. So these are all my JPEGs, and I'm going to click export, and it's pretty quick. It just did that. Now, when I open this, you'll notice what it has done is, because I have selected the component, and the component is on 6 pages, it's exported out 6 versions of these blurred carrots. Now, I will only need the one, so I can go ahead and you can see it's also done as a group. So I'm going to go ahead and delete out my other 5. So sometimes it does funky things like that. But you can see it's the one image that's blurred carrots. It's cropped the exact size that I need. So that way, I'm just going to go ahead and change this to good web naming. Okay, that's blurred carrots. I hope it's spelled blurred right. And then I'll be able to use this when I make my code for my nav. I'm just going to put images/blurredcarrots.jpg, and my nav will be the same on all things. Now, again, I don't have very good naming conventions here, but this, and you can see it includes the border here. So I won't need to include the border when I style my CSS. So keep that in mind. That is my second tips image. So you can see these are styled exactly, and they're cropped exactly. So I won't need to do anything in terms of the image sizing. It's all done. Now, again, I have a million versions of my garlic because that one wasn't a component. That's my kale salad. And that has that guy. And then there is my creator image, which if I zoomed in, was not a particularly good image to use, but that's okay. So I don't need to then worry about any of that styling when I get to the site. It's ready. It's good to go. I don't have to do anything to it. It's all already happy. Now, I need to export out Mr. Bear, though, differently, because that icon is an SVG. Now, I happen to already have it as an SVG, but I'm going to go ahead and assume that I didn't. Now, I have all these guys selected. Now, if I click this, I need to remember I need to deselect all the other ones. Otherwise, it's going to export all of them and try to export them as SVG images. So it can be a little bit funky, like I said, having to go through and make sure that you get everybody and then unselect everybody. A little cheat tip that I sometimes do. I save everything when I'm done. Then I go through, mark everybody for export it all. I do not hit save, and then I revert to my saved one before I hit mark for export. Obviously, if you want to save in between, that's fine, but that way I can kind of get rid of those ones. So, for example, I'm going to unmark this, so now nothing is marked for export. I'm going to save it. Then I'll do it with the bear icon. Bear icon, file, export, batch. Now, instead of a JPEG, I definitely want that to be an SVG. styling, how it is on the page. I want to embed it. That's fine. I don't want to outline the stroke. I'm going to hit export. Okay, I've exported it. Now I'm going to go ahead and revert to saved. Yep, any changes I made. And you notice that I no longer I don't have that marked for export anymore when I go to home. In my main nav, there is no bear icon. So that can be one kind of tip to get around it. Otherwise, it's a little bit funky having to go through check and uncheck. But it does at least crop everything the way that you've cropped it in here. And it preserves any styling that you've done and anything where you've adjusted the image, as long as you group it so that that is a single group and that it's all happy. Then it will export it. So speaking of groups, that means that I could, if I wanted to export out this as an image, this group, I could export that out as a JPEG. Sometimes that comes in handy, again, if you're sharing with someone and you want to show them for a design, this is what it would look like. You can export out those things as either JPEGs or PDFs. But we'll get to how we're going to get our text styling in the next video.